Thanks, Evan. So this is Nick McConnell, and you'll be hearing me for a little while. And so really kind of want to cover a couple topics today, mostly around SharePoint and the document management features that come along with it to hopefully help with some of your file storing and needs there from an organization standpoint. And so I want to do a real quick, just high level of SharePoint and kind of what the different tiers are. So typically you see this rolled out as a phased approach. Your first phase tends to be more of the intranet phase, and in this phase, this is going to be more of your information dissemination. There's just a couple of people that are doing updates to the system, and everyone else is really just consuming that information. So this is your company announcements, maybe a company-wide calendar. This is where you're getting all of your HR benefit information, all of those forms you need, all of those things that are relatively static, but that people are consistently looking for and having to, ping accounting or HR or maybe your administration's department to get through that. The second tier then becomes more the collaboration phase. And in that collaboration phase, this is where we're going to get into more of the document management, and so that's what we're going to cover today. But this is also where you're going to have dedicated department sites and team sites and project sites and working groups and committees, all of those different areas for different groups to get together, work collaboratively on whether it be documents or tasks, anything along those lines. The third phase then becomes more of the automation phase. And in the automation phase, this is where we get into the electronic forms, so getting away from some of the paper-based stuff. It's also where we get away from some of those manual processes, so things such as new employee onboarding or maybe invoice approval routing. Maybe it's just simple document approvals or task-related approvals would all come under this bucket. And in here, this is where we're going to get into things such as, let's use new employee onboarding as an example. When a new employee comes on board, there's a lot of things that have to happen. Someone sets them up in payroll and someone sets them up in benefits, and they got to have an IT account created and an email address, and maybe they get facility or badge access, all those different things. And so rather than having to manually record all those steps, we can create one request that says, John Smith starting on Monday. It automatically would create those 7, 8, 10 tasks, automatically assign them to who those people were, and then as those people complete them, it rolls back up, and now you see that 6 of the 10 are completed. So we have that capability from a workflow and a management perspective. The next then becomes more of the externals. So now you're starting to interact with people that are outside of your organization. So whether they be subcontractors or vendors or consultants, anything along those lines. And so you can share documents back and forth and share information as opposed to what we do now where we get into the heavy email-based scenario where it's, send this, get a reply, send this, get a reply, and you go back and forth a million times. And then last but certainly not least is now that we've got all of this information in here and we've got all these different pieces going on, now we want some of those reporting capabilities and really our business intelligence or the BI side. And this is where we can build out our dashboards and we can pull in information from some of the other systems that we have and kind of go through those different components thereof. And so kind of what I'm going to bounce over in from a more of a demo perspective and actually show how do we do some of this functionality and what are some of the capabilities around it. And so we're going to focus really on SharePoint as a whole and kind of the folders versus metadata structure. We're going to get into some document versioning, get into some checkout, check-in features, and then talk through some of the co-authoring and co-editing capabilities that go along with this scenario. So with that being said, let me flip screens on us here. And so what we're going to see is this is an entry point into a SharePoint intranet, so to speak. You can see we've got our different department sites. Maybe we've got a separate employee portal. So a lot of those kind of intranet components tied into then with the collaboration, and then each of these is going to have their own workflow automation inside of it. So it kind of let you see what some of those different pieces are. And if we were to come down, we could see, sort of posts going back and forth, different information here, as well as kind of a documents area. And so if I was to click into the documents, I'm just going to bounce over to another tab here for time constraints. And so in this tab, really what we've got focused here is I tried to mimic a very simple file structure that many of you probably have out on your network drive now, whether it be your F drive or G drive or S for shared, whatever the public company share component drive is going to be. And so let's say I'm going to do kind of a tiered based system. And so let's say that first tier of folders that we had would be the year. This is a very common scenario that we see all the time. And so maybe inside of that year, what we've got inside that, is inside of this, maybe our next tier down is going to be the individual projects that we were working on. And so we were very creative, so I made project 1 and project 2. Obviously, these would be designated to whatever your specific project was going forward. As we were to then click into one of these different projects, maybe the next tier down would be the type of documents that we're working on, whether that be our contracts, maybe some proposals, depending on the line of business you're in. You're going to have different types of that next tier down, and then inside of that, we may eventually see a file. And so this is something that I think all of you see now on a day-to-day basis, where we're very heavily folder-based and sort of this folder inside a folder inside a folder. And what really happens in that scenario is it makes it very difficult to find documents. You sort of punch down 3 or 4 levels deep, then all of a sudden, nope, not that one. You have to backtrack up, go down another path, and you're kind of constantly going up and down in that scenario. And so that's where we're going to run into some of these issues. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce some of the metadata capabilities with inside of SharePoint. And so while this screen's kind of pulling up for me, and apologize if there's any lag in the webinar with the screens, but what we'll see here is I now have the ability to create additional information about that document. Okay, so the reason that we have files or folders inside of folders inside of folders is for organizational purposes. If without those, we've got a thousand files just in one root folder, and trying to track down what you're looking for is going to be very difficult. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mimic a metadata structure that mimics that folder path that we had just done. And so I'm going to make that first tier year. And so at this point, don't really focus so much on exactly what I'm clicking to get here, just knowing what the different components are and the capabilities. And so I'm going to make this field required. Maybe the choices, I'll use those same 2 tiers that we saw a second ago, the 2016, 2017, and maybe I'm going to clear it out so that someone has to fill in that document. Fill in that field for this particular document. And then maybe let's do a similar kind of a thing. This time we're going to use our second tier is going to be the project that we were working on. Again, we'll use those same 2 creative options. And so we'll do our project 1 and project 2. And then inside of that, what I'll do is just for presentation purposes, just to have a different look and feel, let's switch them over to radio buttons just so that there's a lot of different options in terms of how these display and what fields that we could do going forward. And then maybe that last column that we want to talk about, that last field that we want to track, we essentially called it kind of the document type. I use the example of contracts and proposals, but maybe you've got different scenarios that come into play for you. And so we'll do document type, and just for grins, I'll go ahead and for some variation, I'm going to do this as a single line of text. Now in practice, as you're setting this up and running through this with your organization, you're probably going to want some different options there. And so the reason being is that you want people to be able to choose from a list, so that way you're going to get the same kind of reporting from everybody, as opposed to somebody writes out the full name and somebody else abbreviates it. Someone uses the apostrophe, and you're going to get so many different variations of it. And so now let's bounce back to kind of where we were. Now what we're going to do, instead of having these folders inside of folders inside of folders, now as I upload a new document, and I'm going to do everything from the ribbon here across the top, because you can see it has a very similar kind of look and feel to the rest of the Office suite that you currently use on a daily basis, whether it be Word or Excel or Outlook going forward. And as I upload this document, I'm now going to go through, I can browse out, and I created some dummy files here. So let me go ahead and pick that contract. I also could do a drag and drop into here just as easily if you wanted to go that route as well. But what I want to do is I want to get a new document in here, and because I added in additional metadata about this document, now just instead of that document going right into the system, it's prompting me for additional information. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, and maybe I'll say it's for 2017, it's for project 1, and maybe this is a contract. Okay? And I'll go ahead and put that document in. Okay? And let's do a similar thing, because when you're doing a filtering demonstration, filtering with 1 doesn't get us very far. So let's at least go ahead and put a second document into the system here. And so now I'm going to go ahead and put in this proposal going forward. And now as I do this, we're going to get presented with that same exact form, but this time I'm going to fill out 2017, maybe it's project 1, and maybe this time it's a proposal. Okay, and now as I check it in, imagine if you would here, instead of seeing these couple folders and couple files, let's picture there was 100 documents in here, even 1,000 documents in here. Rather than having to drill into folder after folder after folder, all we have to do is come over here, and now those fields that we added now become filterable. And so I can click on that year and I can say, hey, just give me the 2017 ones. And notice it instantly removed all those folders I had, okay, because those documents didn't have any metadata associated with it. One of the really nice things about the metadata filtering, though, is if I select this, notice when I click on this, I only see the option for project 1, even though we all saw that project 2 was available as one of those options in the radio button. Okay, the reason I can't choose project 2 is it won't let you create a filter combination that returns nothing. Okay, so essentially we've eliminated that empty folder scenario. So I don't know about you, but there's nothing more frustrating than, hey, you finally found what you were looking for and you go into that folder and it's empty. I know how it happens, right? We copied it from a previous template and no one's filled it in yet. But the whole point of having templates is so that there's a structure in place and that kind of thing. If we get in and it's blank, we've completely lost everything that we were looking for in the benefits that we had. But I could additionally apply other filters here, so I can come over here and say, now I only want contracts. Okay, and as I do that, it instantly filtered down my document set. Okay, so think of this from the perspective of, you've been working, for a considerable length of time. Many of us have, hundreds and thousands of documents out on our shared drives. And so let's say we were to have something like, you had a request to, hey, could you please go out and grab all contracts from 2016? Okay, well, in that folder-based scenario, you would have been going into 2016, into project 1, into contracts. You're going to grab those documents. You probably are going to create a temporary folder somewhere. Now you're going to copy and paste those documents in. So now we've got 2 copies of those files at a minimum. And you're going to go up. You're going to go into project 2, go into the contracts, copy and paste those. Depending on how many projects we had, you could be there for several hours. If it's an awful lot of files, we could be there for several days. And so that could be a big problem going forward. Instead, if we start utilizing the metadata, now what we're able to do is I can come in here and through about 3 or 4 clicks, I can filter down to the year I'm looking for and the type of document being contracts. And now I instantly have back all of the files that met that criteria. And so in about 4 clicks, instead of what could be several hours or potentially even a couple days, I now have all the information I need and I can fulfill my request. Okay. All right, so let's get into another key component here. So that's kind of the folders and metadata structure. Let's go into more of the kind of the versioning capabilities. And so in this versioning setting, I'm going to pull out 3 different options here for you. And so I'm going to tell you that there's really only 2 levels of versioning, even though you're going to see 3 on the screen. The first level of versioning is really no versioning. Okay, that's what you have now. That's what you use out on your shared drive, the SF, whatever drive letter you use. And that's where you do the save as V2, save as V3, the save with the appending initials, and the save with appending dates. And we do all of these variations that we kind of work through. The next option here is going to be major versions. So this is going to be version 1, version 2, 3, 4. We also have the option if you want to do major and minor versions, and so I'm going to go ahead and switch onto that feature just so you can see the full capabilities that go along here. And this is going to allow us to do version 1, 1.0, 1.1, 2.0, 2.1, so you can have sort of this major and minor versioning scenario. Okay, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to just upload a sample document here for us to play with that we can kind of tweak here a little bit. But while I'm doing that, let me talk through kind of a very common versioning scenario that we get stuck with on a daily basis. And so you go through, you are drafting up a document, you create that document in Word, you attach that document to an email, you address the email to 3 or 4 people, and as soon as you do, let me type that. As soon as you hit send on that email, what's the first thing that happens? Somebody replies and they append their initials to the end of the document, right? The next person replies and they append the date. And it goes on and on and on until somebody replies with -final. And as soon as they do, the next person replies with final 2, and then final with a date. And we repeat this scenario over and over and over going forward, okay? Well, what's the real problem with that scenario? Besides the fact that we're using, email as a file storage system, the real problem is someone's out on vacation for a week, and they come back and they're catching up on the email, and we all do what we normally do, which is start at the bottom of that email, and we're catching up on our thread. And so we reply to one of the earlier messages in the thread. And as we do that, now we are no longer replying to the latest version. And so now the last message that we received is no longer the latest version. Right? And so that's where we're going to run into some of those scenarios. So what I'm going to do here now is we have the option. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to update this document going forward. And I'm going to go ahead and click this, edit this document. And as I do so, that's going to go ahead and open up Word directly. And so now what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to, right now when you're editing files, right, you kind of open them up and it goes through its little routine, goes through that piece there. And as it does, you make your changes and you save it right back. Okay, that's the advantages of doing something out on the F drive or S drive or anything like that going forward. And so now what we're doing is, I'm waiting for Word to open up here for me for a second. But what we want to be able to do is with traditional web-based systems, if you're opening up a file going forward, what happens is you have to download that file, you then make your changes, and then you re-upload that document. Okay, well that's a huge pain going forward and going through the different pieces with that. And so that's where we're kind of running into those pieces. And rather than me, let me just cancel out of this. From that piece. So we have a couple different ways to edit files here from the SharePoint perspective. Okay, so we don't have to do that download-based scenario. And here's one of the big advantages from a versioning standpoint here, is I can now just directly click on this. It will open this document directly in the browser. So notice Word did not open. And so one of the things I wanted to do was open Word so that I could close it to show you that we don't necessarily need to be in Word to go through it. I can either edit that directly in Word, or I can edit this directly in the browser. And so within the browser, you're going to notice I get essentially what we're going to call Word Online. And this gets us through the different capabilities. And I can go run through all the different pieces, the different sets. I can now make real-time edits to this file on the fly, kind of typing in here. It could be a bulleted list that we're working with, if I could type and talk simultaneously. And then in here we got, maybe we're dealing with item 1 and item 2. We can keep making our updates. And notice up here at the top where it says it's saving, okay, it will actually save on the fly. So this is going to save real time for us as we're working through it. One of the huge advantages to doing this, and you can see it went ahead and saved it for us. One of the big advantages here that we utilize SharePoint for all the time. So one of the concerns that a lot of people get on the network drive is when you go to open a file and you get that super annoying read-only notify prompt that just pops up. Okay, the difference here by putting these files in SharePoint is that the default is to allow multiple people in this document at the same time. So for on our side, Evan and myself, we could both be in the same exact document. We could be making changes real time, and I would actually see Evan's document changes while we have it open. So if I was in here and this highlighted section right now, if Evan was to start making changes, those highlights would go away, and I would see his changes real time on the fly because those changes are being committed and saved into the document at the top, just like you saw here as we go forward. So you would have seen when Evan joins in, you're going to get a little bubble effect popping up saying that Evan has just joined your document. And as he starts making updates, you're going to see those changes on the fly going forward. And so you can do a real streamlined approach. The advantage is here, not only is this going to create multiple versions as those updates are being made without you having to do the save as V2, save as V3 game, but in addition to that, it's going to allow you to work collaboratively on the document simultaneously. And so now if someone's working in section 1 and someone's working in section 4 of the document, we no longer have to create separate documents, go through the updates, and kind of merge that stuff together. So a lot of different capabilities that we can do from there. And then I'm just going to click back so that I get out of this document. And now I'm going to be able to see all of these, as well as you're going to notice that it was recently modified. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through here. And so even though we see one document there for versioning that I'll try to keep open in the background for you, now in addition to that, we're now going to get a list of so here was the initial upload we did, and then we opened it up and we made some edits to it. Okay, and so I have the capability to kind of keep going through this whole chain. So if I have any business development folks on the line, a very common scenario when you're working on proposals, you kind of go through and you create that initial version, and then someone goes, hey, can you add in this, this, and this? So we go ahead and add those in, and then they call you back and go, that was more than we wanted to spend. Can you give us back the original one? We just go, yeah, no problem. Grab it, restore. Now, one of the really nice things, first off, this is the ever popular, are you sure prompt? So yes, we're sure. And now what the really nice thing that way SharePoint does some of the version, of course I had it locked because I had it open on the other screen. Let me open that back up for you. One of the documents that we have here, as you're going through the updates, it's going to keep track of that. And then as you restore this version, it's going to copy it up and make that 0.3. And so what will happen is we'll go through that piece. And so now it keeps the audit trail. So now when they call you back and go, hey, now can you give us back the one that had all the updates in it because we juggled the budget or something like that. Now we go ahead and grab that, move it forward, and now we have that next version. So we have an entire audit trail of when it was modified, as well as who did it, as well as any comments if we had put those in as well. Okay. So Evan, I know you're relaying some of the questions here from the chat. So thank you for those that contributed.
Sure. The first question we have actually is, what is a good solution to getting people to use versioning and to use this rather than creating the file 2.0, 3.0, etc. within your organization? Do we have you seen specific tricks or educational policies that work best to get people following kind of the new SharePoint way as opposed to the old file server way?
Sure. So one of the easiest things to do is kind of go through what the pain point. So kind of giving that email-based scenario that I just gave, I think almost everyone can relate to that one. At one point or another, you've been in kind of that chain at some piece of it and kind of got stuck going forward. So from an organizational perspective, it's kind of taking advantage of some of these capabilities, doing kind of this demonstration for them, and we have some of these already set up and that we can work through going forward. But it's really targeting an example that has more to it for them specifically, whether it be maybe they're in the marketing or business development department and so they're consistently working on proposals, or maybe it is a project management group that's constantly working through change order and scope management. But it's kind of getting that task going forward. And then what you're doing is just think of the amount of time that you're saving from searching through all of those different pieces and documents instead of kind of going through the versioning V2, V3, V4 and having that same file out here 15, 20 times so that when you do a search, that same document just keeps popping up all over the place. It's being able to have those running and have them there pretty quickly and easily.
Excellent. So another question is, are there plans or is it on Microsoft's roadmap to include track changes fully into the online versions of their applications?
So yes, right now the browser-based versions that you're going to see are, I'll say probably 70 to 80% of the functionality within it. And if you ever needed to, you can actually, so when I clicked on this document, I edited directly in the browser. But we could have also edited it specifically in Word. So if right now, if you needed some feature that wasn't available, you could be in that browser-based mode and then just quickly switch over, drop it into Word, and save right back. So that's really not going to be a concern. But yes, those are being built in. And one of the things you'll see, especially if you're doing kind of the co-authoring thing where you have more than one person in that document at the same time, when you start seeing that is they're going to pop up sort of color-coded and you kind of see those different changes going on. So it sort of works like the track changes in the review from a formatting and look and feel perspective.
Got it. Thank you. Before we wrap up, are there any further questions from anybody who has joined our presentation today? I don't see anything coming. Great. So if you do have further questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Nick or to Charles, and we'll be happy to set up a further conversation to answer any additional questions you might have. Nick, I appreciate your taking the time to come in and talk about SharePoint and how you can spring clean your environment. And thank you all for joining.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming on, guys.